Well, welcome back to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast. My name is Jody Livingston. I am your host. This is episode 127. 127 of the podcast, and really a part 2. So if you didn't go and listen to 126, you should do that. 126, by far my favorite episode that I think I've ever released on the show. Through all the years that we've done it, my kids actually came on and took over the show and kind of gave really a honest kind of view into their world of what it looks like to be kids of a youth pastor in youth ministry, and all of them now kind of in teen and late teen years. Super fun. So make sure you go back, listen to 126. Today, 127, again, part 2 of that. My wife is going to jump on here and join the show, which we have done before way back in episode 13. We talked a little bit about what it looks like to kind of balance family and ministry. Today, tackling really what it looks like to raise kids in ministry. And so part 1, again, the last episode, kind of getting the kids' perspective of what it feels like to be the kid in that. And then today, we're going to kind of give you the other side of that from a parenting perspective, what that's looked like for us. And I'll say this, we're by no means perfect at this. We've not always gotten it right, but we're figuring it out, just like you. A lot of you are. But I do think we've done okay so far. So our kids are still talking to us, and they still love the church. And so that's always encouraging as a parent to see and hear, because I know that was a big deal for us. So hopefully today will be really helpful, really practical. We'll kind of share a little bit about some things that we have been intentional to do from the start, and some things even that we've done differently here over the last few years as we've kind of been pursuing this thing now together for over 2 decades of that, even before we were married, doing ministry together. So if you're brand new to the show, welcome. Glad you're here. You really picked a great time to jump in here at the beginning of 2023. Podcast kind of gearing back off, and hopefully good things to come this year. If you haven't already subscribed or following the show, please make sure you do that. Love for you to jump in the super secret podcast group over on the Facebook. Put a link for that in the show notes as well. And even as you're listening, if you've got questions, the Facebook group is the place to drop those in there. And I'll be watching that, of course, and Sarah, my wife, as well. So if you're a spouse and you're trying to figure that out, she'll make sure to give her perspective as well. But with all that kind of said and all out of the way, we'll jump in here, and I'll welcome my wife to the show. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome back, I should say.
Yeah, it's been a very, very long time.
You were so excited to do it the first time.
Yeah, I was not. This is not my thing. Not at all. So.
Yeah. So we're back, and it's been a long time. I mean, when I say episode 13.
Yeah.
And when we were looking back, which, was a long time. That was like 2015, probably.
Yeah, a lot has happened since then.
So if you're listening, you're like, wow, that was a long time ago, and that's not a whole lot of episodes. That's because we've done youth ministry while doing a podcast. There have been seasons where, podcast kind of had to take a break, but it's still here, still going. You and I just listened to the recording of the kids.
Yeah, that was I was really proud to hear all the things.
Proud of them or proud of us?
No, proud of them.
Because,
wow, we're such good
hey,
parents.
look at us. We're killing it.
No, I think just hearing their perspective and seeing it from their side, they recorded that episode completely.
We got kicked out of the room.
Yeah, we weren't there at all. We didn't have any of the questions. They came up with the questions on their own, all the things. So it was interesting and fun. And, there may have been a few moments where I got a little misty-eyed. So yeah, it was pretty cool to hear that.
Yeah. So again, if you haven't listened to that episode, it's the one right before this. Go back and listen to it. I mean, you should listen to every episode before this.
For sure.
Yeah, of course. But that one especially was good. Easily my favorite. And I was nervous. Were you nervous it was your idea.
Yeah, because you see, especially as a parent, so we have 4 teenagers. Our oldest is about to be 20, so we're about to not have 4 teenagers. But you never really know what they're going to say. You're kind of like, I think this is what they're going to do or how they're going to react, and then they don't react that way. And so seeing or hearing things from their perspective was, I don't know, I guess I wasn't surprised, but I was that they kind of had the same take that we did for the most part, you know?
Yeah. And we have gotten it right more than we probably thought we did.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's
again, not that we're crushing it over here and getting it.
Right.
We're not perfect in this, but
I think there's still moments. I mean, we moved across the country. We moved literally from one coast to the other. And so that was a big impact on our family and on our ministry.
And that was scary. I mean,
yeah.
You can go back and listen. I'll put the link to that episode. There was an episode when Chris Trent was still on the show with me that we talked all about that move and what that was like. Chris kind of interviewed me that day and was like, hey, here's, what's going on. And yeah, we talked about that a lot. But for you and I, even for our perspective, that was a scary moment.
Yeah, for sure. Well,
and our kids were older.
Yeah, our kids were older. Our oldest was 15 at the time, and she was about to get her driver's license. Literally, we moved about a month before she was supposed to get her driver's license, which we moved to a different state, so that derailed her. So that was a big, that's a big deal for a teenager. And our oldest is super independent. So, she's very much like her dad. So loves to
What do you mean?
adventure, loves to go and do things, and just very independent. But
yeah.
Yeah.
So let's give some context.
Okay.
If you're new to the show or you haven't listened for a while or you weren't listening back in 2015 because you probably weren't in ministry in 2015,
Right.
And you didn't hear episode 13, which I would encourage you to go back and listen to that one too. We were in a very different phase of life then than we are now, and so this is fun to revisit. We probably should have went back and listened.
I was just gonna say, what did we even say?
So people are going to go listen to 13 and be like,
about?
these people are full of it. They don't know what they're talking about. They're making stuff up. Yeah, go back to listen to those. What we talked about then, based on the title and the description that I read, was this idea of balancing family ministry, which has been that's a big deal. That's a big deal when you're in ministry. What I'm hoping to talk about today is not necessarily balancing that, but specifically parenting in ministry, because I think you and I have talked about this a lot. We see youth pastors, youth ministers start ministry young, maybe before they were married or when they're married, but with no kids.
Yes.
And then they have kids, and that dynamic, it rocks everything.
Yeah, for sure.
And then we often see those people as their kids start to get a little older, toddler age, maybe even into like early school age, kind of step out of student ministry, either step out of ministry altogether, which happens a lot, or into a different avenue of ministry. And a lot of that is sometimes because they're trying to figure out how to parent through that.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's a lot that is around that, but I think sometimes, I don't know, for me and for us, you took your first youth pastorate or, in ministry when we were dating. I don't know if we were engaged at the time. So that was a long time ago. And then, so we got married and we've been in ministry the entire time. We've been married for 22 plus years and we've been in ministry the entire time. And our kids have always grown up in church. And so they don't know what it's like not to be in church. So I think that's a great perspective. But, they even said, I think in some of their talking that they don't really know what it's like to not be in church. And so, they have a different perspective.
And for us, the first 11 years of ministry, I was bivocational.
Yes.
Or at least I was part-time at a church. Bivocational would imply 2 jobs.
But really it was trivocational. I don't know.
It was however many we needed to make it. And that was when the kids were a lot smaller.
Yes. And you were doing that. And then I also was doing, things here or there just to kind of make a little bit of extra money.
Yep.
We kind of decided early in our marriage that I would stay home and we would try our hardest for me to be able to stay home with our kids. And so, you just do what you need to do.
Which when we were first married, we were both working
Both working full time.
and both going to school.
Yes.
And then we had our oldest,
Yes.
Emma, and we both worked at the YMCA.
Yes.
And our schedule worked such a way that I was in the evenings, you were in the morning.
Yes, we were watching her. So we didn't have to put her in any kind of like daycare or anything like that.
We flip-flopped a little bit.
We didn't see each other very often, but
we saw each other at work for a little bit.
And she got to see both parents. So that was pretty cool too.
Yeah. Okay, so let's start here. Right before we started the recording, you said, "Do you have questions?" And I said, "No, actually, I haven't even really thought through it a ton, other than it's important and I think we should talk about it."
Yeah. So this is what's funny. I am a uber planner, like super planner.
Yes,
and
you are.
Jody is not as much of a planner as me.
Correct. Which, again, if you've listened to the podcast during the Chris Trent days, you knew Chris had a list.
Right.
I did not.
That's me. So not having a list of questions is super scary, but, I've been married to you for a long time now, and so I'm kind of used to it. So
also, it's my show.
Yeah, it is your show.
And so even if I had questions, I wouldn't give them to you ahead of time.
Okay.
There we go. So we'll pretend like I had questions. Let me ask this, though, because I think this is a good place to start. For you, in your mind, what would you say have been priorities for us as we have been parenting in ministry? Specifically, I say ministry because this could apply to anybody in other places and other roles. But let me be more specific. In youth ministry.
One thing that we've always said for our kids, or when we had kids, this is before we even had kids, I think was that we always wanted our kids to love the church, and we wanted our kids to be involved in ministry. And for us, that was, I was super involved before we had kids. I was like the number one leader, the number one volunteer.
For sure.
Helped with tons of stuff. And when we had kids, I just kind of continued.
They became the mascot.
That's exactly right. I just brought them with. And, I know some people that won't work, but for us, that did work. And I really do contribute a lot of the reasons why our kids love the church is because they got to be a part of it and they got to see it firsthand, and they got to, just see that like church isn't a job for us. It's like life,
Yeah, for sure. And I think we have always tried to be real with our kids.
Yeah.
Like, I think they've seen the good and the bad and the ugly. They don't live in some la la land of ministry. However, we have also tried really hard to shoulder things that would allow them to the best that they could to just be them.
Yes. And I think, and I'll even speak as a student pastor's wife, that you have also done that for me too. You like just in ministry, I think we've really tried to have a healthy perspective for our kids to know, like you recognize as a parent things that they should or should not know, or maybe things that they might get upset with and that they might be frustrated with maybe a person or a group of people or something like that. And so you wouldn't want to say anything because that would hinder their...
Flesh that out. Let's flesh that out a little bit. What does that look like? What does that look like on a practical level for us of shouldering some of that?
So I think the first thing for us is we've never been one, even if we disagree, and I say we because I feel like I'm very much a part of the ministry, just along with you. I know you're the one who gets paid for that and you have all the responsibility, but I still say we, as in it's our ministry.
Yeah.
And so I think I totally lost my train of thought.
It's because I didn't have a question written down. Let me speak to the we.
Okay.
I think you're right. Like, for the most part, it's, I'm the guy getting paid.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think people often understand how much you do behind the scenes and how involved you are.
Yes.
Our kids see that.
Yes.
And we've never had to tell them that. I think they just see that and recognize that. And for you, that's fine. You don't want the spotlight.
Yeah. I don't want the spotlight. That's not me.
But in terms of like, if we disagree, I think is where you're saying with somebody or a decision or something like that.
You're always going to have disagreements. So if there was an issue where we didn't agree with something that was happening with like the pastor or a coworker or something, we never said that in front of our kids. We would never, come out and say like, hey, we don't, Pastor so-and-so, they're just terrible because they made this decision, even though we would disagree with it, we would not talk about that in front of our kids because I wouldn't want them to hear or, to have an opinion on something that doesn't necessarily involve them, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Or directly affect them necessarily.
Correct. Yes.
And if you happen to be listening and you are one of my bosses, we never disagree.
Yeah. But I think, I don't know, maybe in our younger days of ministry, we maybe would have been a little more vocal. But I think as we've gotten older, it doesn't help anybody. It doesn't help your kids.
Right.
It doesn't help, for you to harbor things like that. I just don't think it's very helpful. And so I think there's just a lot of times where if our kids don't need to know, then they're not going to. I think we also were really careful about. So our kids are in our ministry now, and so they see all of the coworkers and all of the other pastors that are there, and they are friends with their kids. So it's a little more, I don't know, it's more involved now because so if they were to overhear a conversation that we were saying that we didn't agree with Pastor so-and-so, and we're, our church now, there's a lot of pastors. So know that I'm not speaking to like one pastor, there's lots of pastors, there's tons of pastors. So I think.
But even in early days when it was the senior pastor and me.
Yeah.
Right. It was the same.
Yeah, for sure.
Or if it was a deacon board or a committee, a lay leadership thing, or, like same principle would apply.
Yes.
Small group leaders.
Yes. I think what I was meaning by saying all of that earlier is that if we don't agree with something and our kids overhear us talking about it, then they might say something to their friends, and then they would get back to their parents, and then it would be like, our kids against somebody else's kid. It just becomes this weird dynamic.
Part, yeah. And I think for us too, to be intentional to not undermine authority.
That's one thing that I think I will speak to our ministry, but I have seen that, in just in church in general, and that really hinders not only the staff member but also their spouse and then their kids, and it just, undermining is just it's not going to be helpful to anybody.
No.
And it eventually just, it harbors those, like, I don't know what I'm saying, like it festers,
that kind of thing. Bitterness.
Yes.
And it doesn't stop with the individual. It spreads to the church.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
And you and I could probably list a ton of folks that we know and have known over the years or known of who are no longer in ministry, or their kids aren't in ministry or in church because of.
Right. That's what I was just going to say. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's good. I think that we have talked about that. We're intentional, and I'm really intentional with that with you too.
Yeah.
Which I think we talked about in episode 13.
Yeah.
Way back in 2015. What about, we talked about involving our kids. Kids actually spoke to that, which was interesting because I don't know that I expected them to.
Yeah.
I really didn't know what they were going to say.
Yeah, exactly.
But I can remember, and Emma mentioned this, 6 months old, taking her to camp, and all of our kids followed suit, right? She was the first, so she was the guinea pig.
Yep.
And our van broke down on the side of the road that year, and there we are with 6-month-old and a van full of kids and on the side of the road. And then just having her in a backpack, kind of walking around camp all that year. I can remember even maybe around that same time, we were at a youth specialties conference or convention, maybe in Nashville. And she went with us because we had no babysitters and there's no option. We've never really lived super close to family, maybe when we were in North Carolina for a while. And I remember like David Crowder on stage just blaring, and we're in the back of this massive room. She's asleep on the floor.
Yeah.
With us.
Yep.
And she mentioned, I think too, us taking her to El Salvador, and all the kids have kind of followed suit in that. We've just kind of always been committed to bring them along.
Yeah.
Why for you? Let me ask this specifically. Why for you as mom has that been so important? Because it's easy for me to say as dad and as youth pastor, like, oh, we're going to go, because that's my personality. But you as mom or spouse.
I think for me, there's a selfish part because I wanted to still be involved in the ministry. That was a big part for me. But I think as a mom too, I wanted to see, you know, so I feel just as passionate about student ministry as you do. And I think a lot of times people don't realize that. They kind of just think it's just you and then I'm just kind of along for the ride. And that's not the case.
Yeah.
I feel very much called to being a student pastor's wife and to be able to just be involved in ministry. And so I think for me, showing our kids that and getting a bit emotional, just showing our kids that how much you love students. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think modeling that has been really important for us. And I think even in terms of, I'll say beyond bringing them along, although that's really been important for me. And I'll say for me, okay, for me, why that was such a big deal was because we didn't always have the time away or the means to get away, even if we had the time. And so in a lot of ways, if we were doing a ski trip, our kids were coming. Yeah. I mean, dang, that's just a perk.
Right.
Or like if we were, maybe we did a lock-in, which I don't do anymore unless I have to.
Yeah, we're not doing those anymore.
Yeah, those days have gone. But you would come and they would maybe go home early. They didn't stay all night.
Yes.
But having them around, our house generally, especially when they were younger, was really full of students all the time.
Yes.
And so they were surrounded by teenagers.
Yeah.
Those were kind of fun nights, for them to be a part of that for me.
Yeah.
That's an advantage. That's an advantage.
Well, I think too, like you talked about being bivocational, they didn't get to see Dad I wouldn't say very often, but having
in the early years for sure.
But having responsibilities like during the evening because Jody's done junior high, high school, and then college ministry at
different stuff.
Yeah, different along the way. And so, he had a lot of responsibilities in the evenings because that's when like college kids or kids are around. And so, I don't know. I think as a mom, I just thought that it was just really important for our kids to see their dad and what he loved to do and what he was passionate about. And, I wanted them to see all those things and to see why we're doing what we're doing, and to see that and to be that too,
Yeah.
And
a lot of football games they've been to.
Yeah. I mean, oh my gosh, we've been to so many
water polo matches,
different things,
junior high band things,
my goodness.
Like
yes,
musicals, ballets. I mean, all the things. We just brought them with us. It was something to do for them a lot of times. And they were always excited because they knew someone.
Yeah.
So they thought that was fun. I think they thought that was fun. They seemed like they thought it was fun.
I think our kids said this, or maybe I'm just remembering, but our kids, we weren't around family. We didn't live super close, and our family did come and visit, and we went and visited them, but we weren't super close, so we couldn't go to do all the things. And so, like, our church became our family.
Yeah.
In some ways, and kind of like, and I don't know, they just became a part of these kids' lives, and so that's like now it's just what they do and what they've.
Our kids have been in so many weddings.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Many weddings.
Yeah. And
more weddings than I've been in, and I am
probably. Yeah, and I think, they even spoke to this too, like being able to talk to adults. I can't tell you how many people tell us your kids are so well spoken. Like I never thought we didn't teach them how to do that. I think they've just always been around people. And just in general. And so they just, I don't know, picked it up. I don't know. People skills.
What are some things that we talk about trade-offs. Obviously, a lot of times in youth ministry, especially, maybe you don't have the money, you don't have the vacation, you don't have the time, you don't have the means. How do you feel like we have maybe compensated for that with our kids? Other than like what we talked about, like camps, ministry. Are there practical things that you can think of? Like I can think of a couple. I can think of
jumpstart me because
you've been like the room mom for
oh man
tons. When we've been band booster people, and I've chaperoned so many events.
Yep.
Because I could do that as part of my job, especially when they got especially once they got into middle school and high school.
Yes.
Then I could chaperone as a part of my job. And then what was funny, what came of that was it was all moms and me usually. So then if they didn't have a dad, even after our kids weren't in school there, I was still getting called to come chaperone those events.
Yes.
And so I'd show up and all these moms were like, which one's your kid? And I'd say none of them. And then they thought I was just this creepy guy hanging
Who's
out.
that weird guy?
Yeah. But you did the same.
Yeah. I think we always saw too, we lived in the South before coming to California. And so I think there's just culturally, it's a lot different. And so we were kind of in this, not a Christian bubble, but to an extent.
That's the Bible Belt for sure.
Yeah. And so we wanted, number one, we wanted to be involved in our kids' lives. And so if they were doing sports and extracurriculars, we wanted to be involved in that. And then we also saw that as an opportunity to be able to share with other people and to get to know people, that weren't in our little circle or our Christian bubble. And so it was twofold. And so, we volunteered and we did all the things. And I was PTA president, of the middle school. Literally all I did was say I wanted to volunteer to help, and I became the PTA president. That was the craziest thing. But, there's just lots of things that we did. And
what about, you talk about extracurricular and things like that. We've had some rules for that for our kids over the years in terms of sports and.
Yeah. For us, like we talked about earlier, church isn't a job for us. It's our life, and it's not in a legalistic way. And when I say that, I mean, like, we don't have to check the box and be at church every single time. We want to be there. And we have, there's times where
you don't want to
we don't want to be there. But, for the most part, we served and we do those things. And so.
Yeah. But we limited, right? We had limits.
Yes. So we just decided also that we weren't going to our kids weren't going to be involved in sports if it conflicted with church. And that was, for the most part, we got a little bit of pushback probably along the way. And I know we did.
We did.
Definitely. But, and, not even just from like our own kids, but other people, our friends' kids and all the things. And we just really wanted to show our kids, and we wanted them to know, like, church is a priority to us. And it's not just about attending church. It's, belonging to that church. And you want to do all the things. And so we just made a commitment that we weren't going to do that. And, that was us.
Again, just us.
Right.
What we've chosen. Not saying that everyone should or has to, but it's been incredibly helpful for us.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we also said one thing at a time.
Yes.
We were not going to run
a
kid to 2 or 3 different things.
Yes.
Or even in this season, like you can do one sport, but not every sport.
Yes. Well, and that was the thing too. We have 4 kids. And so, our oldest was almost 6 when our youngest was born. And so we had so when our youngest was born, we had 4 kids, 5 and under. And so, obviously as they got older, we started having conflicting things. And I was a stay-at-home mom for a long time. And I was the only one driving. I couldn't drive 4 kids in 4 different directions. That just wasn't going to happen, and you were in ministry. And so sometimes you couldn't go to the things. And so I think we just made priorities, and we said one thing at a time. And sometimes that was, okay, maybe you can't do softball this year, but you could do volleyball instead because your sister's playing volleyball. Or softball at the same time, or things like that. And so we would have to, we would just have to figure out. And our kids were great about it,
we explained it.
Right.
Right. I think that's the other thing is we've always tried to be upfront and honest.
Yes.
And we've always tried to take the time to explain the why.
Yeah. And here's the thing. We got married when we were around 20, and we had kids when we were 22. So we were pretty young anyway.
Yeah, people listening are like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'd been a youth pastor since I was
19.
18. Yeah. Been a long time.
Maybe I guess.
I wouldn't recommend most of those things we just said.
Yeah.
But it's been good for us.
It has been good. So, we just didn't, I don't know if it was we didn't know any better or maybe we're just wiser beyond our years.
Yeah. We'll take the second.
Or wise
I'll
beyond
go
our
with the
years.
second.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. We just kind of did what we thought was best. And
I think for us, if I had to boil that down, like all that, I would just say we set out really early, you and I together, and established what the priorities for our family would be before we had kids. And not, again, not in a legalistic,
Right.
kind of, oh, you can't ever miss church kind of way. Or, I think for us, church, being in church is a high value for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Belonging has a high value for us. Serving, that's a high value for
Yes.
us. Beyond the job,
Yes.
beyond the thing, right? Going, the extra, that's a high value for us.
Yes.
Hospitality is a big
Yes.
high. That's a high value for you.
Yeah.
I think those types of things are high values for our family. And because we were on the same page in terms of what those values were, I think that's really affected how we parented.
Yes. And I think, there have been times where, I don't know, we don't always agree. I mean, like we can't,
Yeah, for sure.
like, I don't know. I just want people to know that I feel like I'm a pretty strong person, strong-willed maybe. I don't know. Stubborn.
Yeah, you have to be to put up with me.
But I'm just saying. So I think, I think it might come across as I'm just doing what you're wanting to do all the time. And that's not the case.
So that's definitely not the case.
Yeah. So I think we just kind of figured out, like Jody said, we figured out priorities and we were like, okay, this is what we're going to do, or this is what we want to do. And we need to figure out how to make that happen with our kids. And so, yeah, being honest with them is, I think, the biggest thing. And it's funny, even them in their podcast that they did, they talked a lot about how we were honest with them. And I don't know, it's just what we've done. And I don't know, I guess maybe that's not normal. I don't know, because that's normal for us. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's how we've always tried to be. They talked a lot about the move.
Yes.
Which was a big time move.
Yes.
For our family, huge for them.
Yes.
We were terrified.
Oh yeah.
As parents.
Yeah.
As parents.
Like, are we ruining our kids?
Or what are we doing? And I just remember in that moment talking to pretty much everybody we knew and saying, hey, this is what we're feeling like. This is where we're going. Like, we've kind of put our yes on the table, putting that yes on the map, and it's on the left coast. And we're really scared about this with our kids.
Yeah, for sure.
And so many people that we love and trust
and respect
said, your kids will be fine.
Yeah.
Model faithfulness and include them and, pray and trust the Lord. And it was hard.
Yeah. I mean, I think, ultimately we sat down with our kids multiple times and talked through it with them. And, or like I said, our oldest was 15 and down. So, I think us being honest with them and letting them ask questions, ultimately, like, we were going to make that decision. We were going to make those decisions, but we definitely wanted their input and we wanted their perspective. And we believe that, I don't know, it's important. It's important because it's their life too. It's not just us.
I feel like we haven't, we've been firm in our conviction and the things that we value highly, but we have not been heavy-handed in how we parent.
Very much, yeah. So,
like we've always said, we will trust you until you show us that we cannot.
Yes.
And I feel like we've been consistent with that, and I think our kids feel that.
Yes.
I wasn't sure that they did until the last episode.
I know.
And now I'm like, dang, I'm pretty good at this parenting.
You're like,
thing.
Man, this is pretty.
Look at
we're
me.
pretty great.
I'm like,
man,
that's so wrong.
Yeah.
Okay, what about outside of ministry? There's things that I think you and I have done. Let's take the ministry side necessarily away, because I think, and personally, like, what are some things personally you feel like we've done as parents? So, like, I'll give you an example. Especially when our kids were younger, I would intentionally do my devotional time at the kitchen table, even though it was not a great spot, in the mornings so that they would catch me doing it.
Yes.
Now, not to be, look at your daddy, so holy, but I wanted them to know that that was an important discipline and a high value in my life.
Yes.
They have watched us share our faith with countless waitresses and waiters in restaurants or on mission trips or I think they talk about Target, right? Like,
Yeah. Everywhere.
and that's not necessarily always for their show or benefit, but I also want to make sure that I'm not just doing it when I'm quote unquote on the clock.
Right.
That my faith,
Or it's convenient for you.
right? That I'm being consistent. I want them to see the same dad who's on stage preaching on a weekend or on a midweek to students is the same dad that they know and see walking around wherever.
I think for me, because, we did have kids pretty close together and pretty early on in our ministry, I used to have students come over all the time, or they would go with me to like a grocery store, or they would come and just like help me do stuff around the house. I think I was really intentional about letting our kids, it's like for so many benefits, for me, to let someone into my home. I'm personality-wise, I'm very much a perfectionist and love hospitality and doing all those things, but I don't like to let people see all the mess. And so for me, that's a little scary. So I don't know. I think letting our own kids and our students see, like real life, like this is what real life is. This is what real life with 4 kids or a family or all the things.
Was there anything that you heard in their episode that was disappointing to you? Or not in terms of them, in terms of us? Something that maybe they shared that you're like, oh man, I wish we'd done better there. I wish we could have.
I think so when we moved, there's a whole long story behind this, but when like our oldest, when she said she had to do 3 schools, I was like,
yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, that's like, man.
And graduate during COVID.
Yeah. I mean, like, but honestly, if it had to happen to one of our kids, she would be the one that I think like, I don't know, the best
if
one.
If we had to ruin one kid, she's the one.
No, but I think that was a hard one to hear.
Yeah.
Just because like, well, yeah, that's what I was saying. There's a whole lot behind that. But she had to end up switching schools, and we had to put him in a school here to get him through because we moved in December in the middle of a school year, and the schools are much different here than in Georgia. There's just so much that's behind that, which is for another day. But, that was, for me at least, that was a little bit disappointing. Like, man. But
yeah,
in the end, she's 2 years out from school, and she's okay. She seems okay.
She's doing all right. You know what? I think what jumped out to me, and this honestly bothers me. This bothered me more. It's one of those things that I probably realize. Probably, if you ask me, I'm probably like, well, yeah, of course. But listening to them talk about it, and they all really chimed in, was feeling like they're being watched, like they can't really be themselves.
I completely forgot about that. Yeah,
I think that to a degree, that's just part of it. However, and I'm going to ask them this when we're not on recording, but for my own benefit, I feel like we really have tried to let our kids be our kids and not put pressure on our kids to be perfect.
Well, and I was going to say this too. We obviously want what's best for our kids and in all areas of life, but we've never been one also to just be like, oh, these are our kids, and so you have to treat them differently, or you have to be nicer to them, or any of that. We've kind of just, probably behind the scenes, they got the best leaders, they got the best whatever.
Unapologetically, right. I will tell you right now, I will say this, and you listen. I'm telling you, I'm giving you permission. If you're listening to this and you have kids who are in your ministry or will one day be, I'm giving you permission right now. give your kids the best small group leader.
Yeah.
Give them the best cabin assignment, the best
Mhm.
bus assignment. Like, your kids are going to see things and experience a side of things and feel that same criticism that I'm talking about, that I feel like we fought so hard to protect them from. You just can't. That's what I think that was what bothered me. It's like, man, we've tried so hard. They're going to feel that, and they're going to deal with stuff that nobody else in your student ministry is going to deal with.
Yes.
Don't apologize. There ought to be some perks. And listen, that's one of them. That's one of them. And I have never even apologized for that.
No. Well, and I think.
Is that favoritism? Yes. And I will do it all day.
Yeah. But yes, I 100% agree with what you're saying. That's what I'm saying that too. I think we have never been ones to say, oh, my kid gets to do this on stage, or my kid gets to have this particular thing because they're my kid, is what I'm saying.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. We've been really mindful of the perception on our end. I think we talked about earlier, like kind of carrying the weight. Mm-hmm. That's kind of the weight that I think we've carried a little bit is the perception that they would not quite be aware of. We were old enough to be aware of.
Yes.
But at the same time, yeah, dang straight, I give them the best cabin assignment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they get the best small group leaders, and they're going to get the best seat on the bus.
Yep.
Because a lot of times I can't be at their thing.
Exactly.
Because I'm having to run off to deal with a crisis situation for someone else's family.
And I was just going to say, I mean, honestly, that's happened,
Oh, yeah.
Birthdays, and like, there's just stuff in ministry.
It doesn't happen often.
It doesn't happen
but
often.
It does happen.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, I think, just being in ministry for probably as long as we have, it's like, it's not ideal. It's not fun. And most of the time, if something like that happens, I voice my, frustration maybe. But
not in front of the kids.
Exactly. Not in front of the kids. But, like, I know that you can't help that somebody's kid got in a car accident, or somebody, like, you just can't help that. And so I know that life is life, and you want to be able to share Jesus and to show Jesus through everything in your life. And sometimes it's not convenient. A lot of times it's not convenient. And so our kids need to see that too. And they need to see how I respond to those kinds of situations as well.
I would say you have to be very intentional to parent. I mean, you always have to be intentional as a parent, but more so in ministry.
Absolutely.
More so in ministry.
Yeah.
For the most part, I think. But I also don't want to make it seem like it's so hard and out of reach. I think if I could sum up kind of what we've done, you can add to this if you'd like. I think we established what our values and priorities were going to be really early before we had kids.
Yes.
We've revisited them often.
Yes.
At different stages of life with our kids, because everybody's an expert until they're there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think we naively thought, because we'd worked with teenagers so long, that parenting teenagers was going to be a breeze.
Yeah.
And I will say, it's not been terrible. It's been fun. I love parenting teenagers. It's a blast.
It is fun at this age. And, well, teenagers, and then now we're about to have a
adult. Well, we already have an adult.
Yeah.
But one who's really adulting.
Right.
I think, establishing priorities, establishing values early, revisiting those often has been really helpful. I think having a really honest, open conversation involving them in decisions where we could, big and sometimes small things, but big things.
Yes.
And then I think the biggest thing that we've tried to do is just simply model for them a faith that we want them to live out and own.
Yes, absolutely.
In serving, in worship, in our personal study.
Yes.
It really, so much, I think, of parenting in general comes down to modeling a faith for your kids. And I think in ministry, that kind of gets a little tricky at times. But we've really tried to do that. And we've also been really intentional to point out benefits.
Yeah. Yes.
Because there's plenty of times where they point out the not benefit.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Their friends are vacationing somewhere awesome in Ireland or something, and we're not.
Yeah.
We're like nowheresville.
Right.
And there's some trade-offs. Sometimes we, like we've got somebody in the church has a cabin. And they're like, hey, you want to come stay at the cabin?
Right.
You guys can come stay for free. Great.
I mean,
or a beach house.
yeah,
or
and that's
something
the
like
thing. If you're a parent, things can be what you make it. So when it's exciting and it's fun and it's like, hey, we get to go do this, we get to go away. We get to go to this fun place. We get to, I don't know, whatever it is. But taking advantage of those opportunities too, just to show our kids.
For
like,
sure.
Hey, you know what? These people gave us this and it's a blessing because they did, and they, for whatever.
And you're great at this, even afterwards, like, hey, we're going to write thank you notes. We're going to write thank you notes. Like, I think that's just modeling, again, gratitude.
Yeah. Thank you notes and all that stuff seems very like old fashioned, but I don't know. My mom, she taught me, like, you write thank you notes. That's just what you do. You write a thank you note for when someone has given you a gift or a present or when you're grateful to people. And for me personally, like, acts of service and gift giving is big like time. My top love languages. So that comes easily to me. And so for me, that's just how I don't know.
I laugh every time because our kids will do handwritten thank you notes. Mm-hmm. They just do them. And no one does it anymore.
Yeah.
In life in general. But the response that our kids get from that is always so funny.
Yeah. It can go a long way. It's something really small and it goes a long way for people. I
think even when we were moving, obviously a lot of hard conversations we had there. But, we sat down and said, okay, we're going to drive 38 hours.
Yeah. Yep.
With the 6 of us and 2 dogs and whatever we can fit in the van. And
yep.
We we were going to see how that goes.
Yeah.
But one of the things we did at the beginning is we pulled up roadtrippers.com. We said, everybody's going to pick out something fun you want to stop and see along the way.
Yep.
And we'll plan our stops around that. And everybody got to do something fun.
Yeah. And it, we were able to use that as an adventure, and like, it was both things. Like, Jody's very much an adventurer, loves to like go out and do and be in nature and like all the things, just loves all that. And I don't enjoy that as much of the adventuring because I'm a planner. But in this case, I got to plan and he got to do all the adventures and our kids got to be a part of it. And they still talk about it. We lived here for 4 years, a little over 4 years.
They're begging to do another road trip.
Right. And it's
because
like,
they don't care.
But
for us, it's like
the added bonus right now is 2 of our girls have their license and our 3rd one's about to get her license.
Which is not this case when we came and I had to drive the whole way.
Right. So now we get to have all these drivers and we could just drive.
That was so fun. They were blogging across the country. They were taking pictures. We had a little hashtag.
Are so cute to go back and watch.
So I think just involving them is good.
Yeah, definitely involving them is awesome.
Okay. As we finish, should have had a list. I'm sorry. I apologize to those listening. I feel like we've been all over the place.
Yes.
But if you could give one piece of advice as a spouse to the parent, to the parents, like, right, in ministry, what advice would you give?
My advice would be, don't be scared to get involved. It might be hard. It might seem like it's hard. There's a lot of logistics that go into it, especially when you have littles. But don't be scared. And, here's the other thing, especially if you're you're going to have people who are going to want to help. They're going to see, at least with us, everywhere we went, and we were in student ministry, but I see that in, like in other ministries. Like, we have tons of friends who are in different aspects of the ministry. But I think so many people want to help and be a blessing to you. So let them do it. And, I don't know, I took our kids everywhere we went, and believe me, going to camp with 4 kids, little kids, and we had to sleep in bunk beds and we didn't have a bathroom. We had to walk to an outhouse. I mean, to a bathroom. Bathhouse. Yeah, not an outhouse.
Yeah. that wasn't that kind of
camp. No, that would have been.
I mean, we're from the South, but it ain't that exactly. We ain't that deep.
But it was difficult, but we did it, and I figured out.
Gosh, and you know what's crazy? Helped. Our kid talk about that like it was the best thing ever.
I know.
It was awful.
It was really stressful at the time. I do look back now and I'm like, man, that was crazy.
What and
now I'm like, man, I don't know if I could do that. I'm too tired. Like,
well, it's because we're old now.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
I don't
That's
know.
good.
Just don't be scared to get involved. And here's the other thing too.
It's
that I
hard,
think,
but it's worth it.
yes. And I was just going to say, as a wife or a spouse of a person in ministry, I think there's always these unwritten expectations. And, like for me, because of that perfectionism, I have really high expectations for myself. And I had to realize, like, what is my limit? Like, how much can I help? And I think that's the thing. Like, be involved. Don't be scared to get involved, but be involved as much as you can.
Yeah. If you go back and listen to us in episode 13, I do remember we said it because we still say this. I mean, we talk to young youth pastors all the time and we say, don't fight for balance.
Yeah, because there is no balance. There really isn't.
Instead, what do we tell them? Fight for health.
Yes.
And because there are going to be moments where you need to say no.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there are seasons where your ministry needs you more than your family. And there are seasons where your family needs you more than your ministry.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to recognize those.
Yes.
And you say that and everybody writes you off like, what? No way. I'm not putting my family on the altar. I'm not saying put your family on the altar. I'm just saying there are times and seasons where, health looks different.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
I think I would say, and it was interesting again, just listening to our kids because I was really, I just didn't know what to expect. I was a little nervous. I was like, well, me, I'm like, well, if we don't have to use it.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was thinking, man, if they say some real bad stuff, I'm like, we're not using it.
Here's what I would say. I would say be consistent with those values and priorities, especially. And your kids are not going to hate church because they're at church all the time. I think the opposite is true.
Yeah.
And where I see kids in ministry resent the church, it's when their parent who is in ministry is inconsistent.
Yes.
When they're one thing at church, but there's something else at home.
Uh-huh.
And so you've got to be able to, model your faith consistently. Let them see behind the curtain a little, but not all the crud.
Well, protect them, I think is what you're saying. Just protect them from
and
the
as
things that you can.
As our kids have gotten older, they've seen and they're privy to more and more.
Yeah, well, and I think it's important too, as they get older, for them to recognize and to realize, make their own deductions on some things too,
Yeah, we let them do that.
Mm-hmm.
We let them do that.
Yep. Life skills.
Life skills. So good. Well, I think that's good. That's fun. We've talked a long time.
Well, and for not having a list
not having your
of
list.
Things, I don't know.
So let me sum it for us again.
Okay.
Clear on values and priorities for your family beyond ministry.
Yes.
Right. Involve your kids. Bring them along.
Yes.
Right. Be intentional to point out the benefits because there are some flexibility sometimes. We talked about chaperoning. Maybe somebody has a cabin or a beach house or if you're speaking at camp somewhere, they get to come with you. Blah, blah, blah. Okay.
Mission trips.
Right. And then be consistent.
Yeah. Yep.
Be consistent. I think when our kids were small, we were really intentional with like family devotionals and stuff like that. We're all running in a million directions now. That doesn't happen as much. But still for us, we attend as a family weekly almost, always. Yes. We try to find a time where we are together. We have multiple services and then we have multiple campuses. It's a little tricky for us in our current context, but still a priority for us.
Yeah.
I think that consistency over time has been a massive, massive thing for us. So,
and even, I just want to echo this one little thing too. There's been times where you and I were out of town or we were gone or something like that. And like, we don't have to remind our kids to go to church. Like, they go anyway. Like, we don't have to tell them. There's
been times where I've been sick, or you and I were sick.
Oh, yeah.
And couldn't go. And we didn't say, we just knew they left us. And
right.
and they went to church without us.
Yeah.
And I don't know in that moment, am I proud of them for going to church or am I upset that they abandoned us?
Yeah.
Well, hopefully this has been helpful and encouraging. The last one I'm sure was, but I would love to hear your thoughts too. Like as this post, head over to the podcast group. If you're not a member of the podcast group, you can join there on Facebook. And I would just love to hear your thoughts. Like, what are some things in your parenting journey that you are seeing or have seen work well? What are some things that you have found challenging that maybe haven't worked as well? Yeah, I'd love to see that. I think that would be helpful to the whole community and the whole group there. Again, if you're not subscribed to the show, you don't follow the show, make sure you do that. And you can head over to thelongerhaul.com and find all the ways to do that. Jump on the email list there. There's emails that come out on a fairly regular basis for you there. Some helpful, hopefully helpful tips and tricks on that. And then I just want to encourage you not to give up. It is crazy out there for sure. I don't think it's ever been more difficult to be a student pastor than it is right now. And yet the need has never been greater. And, we're on the front lines. And so keep pressing in. You can do this for the longer haul for sure. And your students need you. Thank you so much for the ways that you're already investing in the parents and the families that you minister to. And thanks for how you're investing in your own family. And I encourage you to lean in and do that really well this year. Thanks to my lovely bride for joining today.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Maybe in another 100 and some episodes, 5 years from now, we'll come back again.
Well, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to listen to this episode.
Wow.
No, because I don't want to hear myself.
Okay. Well, I think any last thoughts? You don't have to.
I can't think of it.
Okay, great. Well, hey, thanks for listening today. Again, if you haven't listened to the previous episode, jump back and listen to that. We'll be back in the next episode with more practical, helpful tips for you and your ministry, helping you stay in this thing for the longer haul. Thank you so much, guys. We'll see you in the next episode.